Hello, children. I want to tell you a story. It happened long ago and far away. And children, this story is true. It is the story of a very wealthy man. This man was very, very wealthy, but he had no money. Already the story is confusing. He had no treasure. He had no silver. He had no gold. He had no fine clothes. I really don't understand how this man can be wealthy. He had no jewels of any kind. He had nothing that we think of as valuable. But children, he was rich. So very, very rich. Let me tell you his story. Now, he lived a long time ago, and he worked for a living. He had a very simple job. He lived in a place where people worked hard most every day of their life, and he wasn't any different from all the other people around him. Every single day, he did one thing. He did it again and again and again because it's who he was. He was a fisherman, and he would go out on the water in all kinds of weather. He and his friend would get in their boat, and they would go out on the water. Now, one day, when they were in their boat and they were fishing, and everything was going along like it always did when he was fishing, well, he looked on the shore. And on the shore, he saw a man. And he began to stare at that man, and he thought, I have never in my life seen anyone like this man. This man, he said, he's dressed like us. Well, wears his hair like us. In pretty much every way, he looks like us. But as they stared at him out there fishing in the water, they realized that they had never in their life seen anyone quite like him. And they stared a little closer and a little closer, and they said, it's his eyes. Never seen eyes like that. I don't know who he is. And then the man on the shore, we'll call him the great teacher. Well, the great teacher called out to the men in the boat, and he said, hey, Peter! Now, Peter, he looked at the man, he said, how's he know my name? Children, the great teacher knew all about Peter. He knew his name. He knew what he liked, what he didn't like. He knew everything about him. The great teacher knows everything about you. And the great teacher looked at Peter and he said, come, follow me. And now the strangest thing happened. Because all of a sudden, this man had been a fisherman all his life, who expected to be a fisherman all of his life. All of a sudden, he had only one thought. He wanted to run after the great teacher. And he did. He ran as fast as he could. And he ran and he ran and he ran and he ran. And he saw incredible things. One day, he saw the great teacher do the most amazing thing. See, there was this monster big crowd of people. 5,000 men and such. But then there were little boys and little girls. And there were women out. Who knows how many people were there. And all these people had come way, way out of town, and they were listening to the great teacher because he had lots of good things to say, things that made people smile from the inside out. The problem was there wasn't anything to eat, and people were getting hungry. And you see, the great teacher, he saw that because he cared about everything. So he told his men, he said, you go out into the crowd, bring me everything you can find. Now, they didn't find very much. One little boy had 5 loaves of bread, and he had 2 fish. Now, I don't know about you, but 2 little fish, this fish is big, but it was a little fish. 2 little fish and 5 loaves of bread, how are you going to feed thousands and thousands and thousands of people? Well, children, let me tell you what he did. The great teacher took that basket, he held it up to heaven, and he said, Father, bless this food. And then people started to eat. And they said, bread. It's so good, man. I gotta have more. I gotta have more. It's so good. the fish, best fish I ever ate. And they ate and they ate and they ate. And they ate until they could eat no more. And then there were still baskets and baskets and baskets of food left over. And everyone was very full. And they were very happy. So after all those people ate, Peter and his friends could think of only one thing. They needed a little downtime. They needed to get away. And, since a lot of these men were used to being on the water, it seemed like a great time to go out on the water. So that's what they decided to do. And they got in a boat and they went out on the water. Now, everything was just fine. And I want you to know what the great teacher decided to do. I guess he was a little bit tired too. So while Peter and his friends were out on the water, well, the great teacher decided that what he wanted to do was climb high up on a mountain so that he could have some time alone with God his Father. And that is what he decided to do. And if you look very closely, children, you can see him. There he is, having some really nice conversations. He's very tiny. He's actually very big. But in this picture, he's very tiny. Now, suddenly, everything began to change. Suddenly, all at once, unbelievably, it's really more important than that. Okay, we'll try again. Suddenly! No, that's not going to work either. Children, I should have started here. I started to start here. Let me try again. Suddenly! Now, this is very disappointing. But I'm not worried, children, because you see, I have another idea. Yeah! Children, suddenly, the sky grew dark. It was like the worst storm anybody had ever seen. You have to remember these men were fishermen. They were used to bad storms. This was a really, really terrible storm. And the sky grew darker and darker. And as the sky grew darker and darker, the waves got bigger and bigger. And oh, it was awful. And as the storm got worse and worse, the wind began to blow. Shh. Wait, children, let me get the boat on our page here. That little boat was in so much trouble. Children, can you make the sound of the wind? Shh. And the men on the boat screamed, "Yeah! Yeah! Oh, it was so bad. The boat was rocking. People were screaming, yeah! Yeah! The wind was blowing. Shh. Oh, goodness, it was bad. And then they looked out on the water and they thought it was bad, but it just got worse because they saw someone walking on the water. And they thought, wait a minute. People can't walk on water. This isn't possible. And so they stared and they said, it's a ghost! Sorry, children. But Peter looked a little closer and he said, I think it's Jesus. So he called out, children, Jesus is the great teacher. He is the great teacher. He's the one that Peter had been following. And he calls out to him and he says, Jesus, if it's you, tell me to walk on water. All around there was a terrible storm. The wind was blowing like no one had ever seen wind blow before. The waves were so high. Lightning was flashing across the sky. There was the sound of thunder. And it was loud. And it was terrifying. And Jesus looked at Peter in the middle of that terrible storm. He stretched out his hand to him. He looked at him with those beautiful eyes of kindness. And he said, "Don't be afraid, Peter. Come!" Well, Peter, he put one foot out of the boat. I'm standing on the water. I'm standing on the water. He pulled his other foot out of the boat. He's standing. He started to walk. He had his eyes on Jesus. But then, children, he took his eyes off of Jesus and he started to sink into the water. He was going to drown. It was bad. And he yelled, "Help me, Jesus!" And in the middle of that storm, Jesus reached out to Peter, and Jesus saved Peter. Children, I love this story, and I want you to know something important. That if you're in the middle of so many things you don't understand, it feels like a storm, and it's scary, and you're frightened, I want you to know that Jesus rescued Peter. He's still in that business. He can rescue you. He can reach into the middle of the worst things in your life and pull you to safety. So children, how can you know this great teacher? How can you know Jesus? Well, children, there's only one way. You see, children, all of us have a problem. We have a broken heart. And we try to be good so we can fix it. But that won't work. Because you see, children, we need a new heart. We need a heart full of love. And we can't give ourselves that. Only Jesus can do that. You see, God looked at us and knew we needed a rescue. So God sent Jesus to die on the cross. He took our place, children. He took our punishment. And when you ask God to forgive you and Jesus to rescue you, then Jesus will be your king. And God will be your father. And God will give you hope. He'll give you love. He'll take away your fear. And he'll change you from the inside out. So, children, who is the very, very rich man that I was telling you the story about? Well, that man is Peter, children. Peter had a heart full of love. He had peace and joy and kindness. He had hope. He had this because Jesus gave it to him. No, he never had a lot of treasure, but he actually had true treasure. Peter is the rich man in the story, and you can be like Peter if you'll simply trust Jesus. Thank you, children.